All right, we're gonna get started. Many of you know Spencer from the previous times he's been here, but we just want to thank him for coming again and spending some time with us. And he's got some things to share about a recent conference that you put together.
How do I kill this?
Dave?
You got it.
It's So this conference was called
The Next Sunday.
The Next Sunday. This is sort of a pun about what does Sunday look like moving forward post-COVID and all the changes that have happened politically, socially, economically within our country recently. And also, I kind of like the phrase that you mentioned, "Who moved my pew?"
Yeah.
Which is sort of kind of a way of looking at things. So Spencer's going to talk a little bit about that, what kind of where we're at and what things may look like in the future, right? Is that
Yeah.
All right.
All right, great. Well, what I love, hello online. What I'd love to do is share just a quick little ditty about who I am for those of you who don't know, and then give you a kind of a short summary of this event that we did called The Next Sunday, and then just kind of open it up. So maybe you've come with some ideas that you want to play with, and I'd love to just, you throw out an idea and we'll just go with it. Or maybe as I'm kind of talking, be kind of taking mental notes like, oh, what did you mean by that? Or well, I have felt that too. Here's how it's affected me in one way or another. Is that fair enough? Okay. And then what are we thinking until about?
Well, for sure by 8.
By 8. Okay. So somebody got a timer or whatever? Okay. Good. Oh, okay. Oh, there. That's even better. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I've been involved in church, well, kind of since junior high. But I've been in ministry for over 40 years, believe it or not. I've been under care of the session at the Presbyterian Church. I've planted a vineyard church. I've been at a conservative Baptist church and youth ministries. I'm right now at present doing a laboratory at a Lutheran church. I'm ordained disciples of Christ, but in the non-denominational world, I also was a megachurch pastor. I planted a home church, house church. I just done a number of things. And so church has been kind of the place where I have lived. But in 1998, I felt like it wasn't doing what I would hope it would do. I was at a mega church and I decided to just leave. The way I tell people that decision in my career path is that it was too painful to leave, at first, because salary and, my retirement plan, all the things. And, if you're not a speaking pastor, like, you could sell like A.L. Williams Insurance or something. Like there's just not a lot of things you could do after, being a minister at that level. Okay. So then in 1998, it got too painful to stay. So for me, I left cold turkey. Didn't really have anything else. And so we started a little website called theooze.com and it kind of just blew up. Right time, right place. And then I did a little event called Solarize, which helped people kind of find each other. And we were talking about all the issues that are still kind of hot buttons today, quite honestly. Women in ministry, is there a heaven or hell? And does God send people there? And, what about the gay issue? And, everything you can imagine were the things we were talking about even 20 years ago. But it gave space. And so I always enjoy giving space for those questions. But I felt very strongly, even in 98, that what we do as church will not survive in the next few years. Again, this was 20 years ago I was feeling this. And so this this event that I did online, we basically asked kind of post-pandemic, what's the next Sunday? And we used it in the sense that the main organizing factor for people in the last 500 years. Phyllis Tickle wrote a book, Great Emergence. She talks about every 500 years the church does kind of what she called a yard sale, where it just put it all out there and said, what's going to remain? You know what I mean? Because what we do as church today, everybody goes like, oh yeah, this is what church, Jesus did it this way. Or it's not true. I mean, we didn't even know we weren't Jewish for 70 years, you got to realize, right? We met in the outer temple on Saturdays as church. Until the temple was destroyed, we didn't even meet, in any other organized fashion. And it was because of the persecution that we literally met around dead people in the catacombs, underground, And I don't know if you know this, but have you ever seen the ichthus? It's that fish thing. It's called an ichthus, right? Well, the symbol comes from, at least the story goes, is that because we were under persecution, that one person would draw like a smiley face, right? And if the other person was there, whatever, they wouldn't know, and they just, like they were in conversation, continue the conversation. But if someone knew what that meant, they'd complete it with a smiley face upside down, which created a fish. You see? And so they'd know that it was safe to have a conversation, because remember the lion's den and all the rest of the stuff happening in Rome. So the church was persecuted, so we thought, oh, okay, let's not even tell anybody about our faith. We're underground, right? And then in 312, 311, what happened? Constantine came in and made it the government's religion. And you had to be a Christian. You see, do you understand how it changes over and over and over? And like that church building with the Sunday, we didn't even have Sunday school apart from about 100 years ago, actually. You know what I mean? Like that didn't even exist. But the Sunday, worship house is only about 500 years old in that form. So that's just been the organizing factor. So what is going to be the new organizing factor? And here's the reason why it's really important and has come to a head right now. We have lost the reasons why Sunday morning is the organizing factor. Here are a couple of the reasons. And just think in your own mind, because you might imagine some others, think of some others, right? One of the main reasons why we existed was that people were out working, agriculturally in their farms or in their areas, and they would work for 6 days. Then on the seventh day, right, they put on their, anybody? Sunday best, right? You've heard this. They put on their Sunday best. They took a shower. They put on their, you know what that was called? Peacocking. You know why? They came in and peacocked, right? They had some nice clothes on because it was the mating ritual, right? People came to church to meet a mate who had the same kind of ethnicity, usually, the same kind of faith system, the family ties. You see, how many people meet in church today in a mating ritual?
0.
Yeah, don't you think? I mean, they did. That's some that.
Christian colleges.
Yeah, our Christian colleges. Yes, yeah. But even with Christian colleges, I bet you people who meet with Match.com or eHarmony, or do you understand all these? There are so many other ways that people are meeting their life mate. So right off the bat, the mating ritual is no longer a reason why someone will come to Sunday morning. We lost that. See? All right. Well, how about, do you know why we have stained glass windows? What are most of the great stained glass windows of the cathedrals of Europe? They tell stories. Why did they tell stories?
Nobody could read.
Nobody could read. The most literate person in the town or parish usually was the minister, right? And they could read, they went to seminary. And most of the people who came to church could not read. They didn't get a Bible. They didn't have personal quiet times and studying that way. They came to hear the stories. But not only that, believe it or not, the pastor, the minister, the priest also taught about personal hygiene, crop rotation. Do you see medical issues? That they were the ones who would tell the illiterate, congregation about issues that they were reading, studying, or hearing, or being taught on. Tell me how many people come to church to learn about the latest medical issues, or or even Bible stories. During COVID, and again, COVID did not create the scenario for a next Sunday. COVID just revealed it. It was already happening, right? So during COVID, people found ways when they weren't able to assemble to be able to learn. They didn't just stop not having any kind of Bible learning, right? So how are they learning scripture and spiritual ideas now? Podcasts, yeah, Zoom meetings, books, there are so many different ways where people, in fact, I would challenge it. It'd be very interesting if we could do a study on this, is whether or not people today are more biblically literate than most priests were 500 years ago. Do you understand what I'm saying? The amount of information we have at our fingertips today compared to what a priest had 500 years ago is astounding. So if literacy and Bible study and teachers, in fact, the difficult thing is a lot of people are not coming back because they've got better teachers now than they had before. You see? So we lost that. Is that kind of crazy? Well, another thing that was very important was barn raising. Remember? A tornado like this would go, like the hurricane came through, you'd come to church to find out who died, who got sick, who needed a casserole, who needed to, something to be repaired or rebuilt, who had a grandkid, right? Now, the way in which people let other people know about a death in the family, you don't have to call everybody. You don't have to write a personal letter, or basically you tweet it out or you put it up on Facebook and virtually everybody knows within a few hours. See? So that's that need for information, communication about people in your community is no longer an organizing factor. So my question is, what do we have left that people would come in an orderly fashion? Meaning what we order ourselves around, if it's not the sermon, if it's not mating ritual, if it's not communication. Do you see? So people aren't neglecting the church. People are not consumeristic. In fact, one of the things that's great about Zoom, this is a thing that is wild. I'm doing a laboratory in a church of Methodists who are extremely older. and most churches, after pandemic, the high number is 50% return. It goes as low as 30 and below on averages, right? So in questioning people, like again, surveying, asking, right? Why is it that you haven't returned? Here's the most amazing learning that I received post-pandemic in this way, right? You could blame, criticize, blackball, and assume that people are bad because they haven't returned, right? Don't you think? I mean, most people are like, oh, yeah. But when you have a conversation, ask why. These elderly people have told me in our small little case study is that, you know what? When I'm at home and I'm right next to my computer, you've got 3 cameras and they zoom in real tight. You know what I mean? I can see you now. I was 10 rows back and I couldn't see. And you know what? Nobody cares how loud I turn it up, and I can actually hear you now. So literally, People are staying away to have a better worship experience than in the room. Do you understand? They hear the music better. They see faces. They can listen at the level that they want, right? So they're staying away for all the right reasons. But what do they miss? And it's community. The only organizing factor right now that I can see is they want to be together and they want to be the church, right? So the question is, what's the next Sunday? What is it that will be that group gathering to be the body of Christ, to be the church, to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a world that needs love, care, compassion, justice, mercy? Do you see what I'm saying? Because it seems like all of the other disciplines that they were getting in Sunday morning are met somewhere else, and they're not looking for the church to give them that anymore. So what is the thing that as we evolve, we take our next, and I don't think it'll take 500 years for the church to change again. It'll probably every 50 years or 5 years, But in that idea that Phyllis Tickle talks about, that if at 2000, the year 2000, the shift happened, and we're 20 years into it already, what is it that people will need the church to be? For them to be the body of Christ. See, for all the right reasons. So that was the next Sunday. That was the reason why we did this, was to listen to people who were doing church a little differently, or had observed it, or studied it, or understood it, or worked with it. I could share some of those stories or whatever, but I just wanted to stop and let that kind of absorb for a minute. And one is, I could just open it for questions. We can all do it. If you want to turn to each other and even say, what did I see? What did I learn? That would be okay too. I don't know what you would like to do, but I'd like to open it so that it's more conversational. You want to take a minute to talk to each other for a second and then jump in, or do you want to just do it? We can all enjoy the conversation.
Let's just do it together.
Okay. All right. Let's do it together then. All right. So, what'd you see? What'd you hear? What'd you learn? And just that quick intro or idea or conversation. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What comes to mind? Anything? Is this like old news? You knew this, been there, done that, or
is this an ongoing, like generally amongst all denominations, religious affiliations, or are there groups that are? Because I feel like I do have some people I know, people I work with that are very energized these days, and they meet together and talk about, and I can say a bunch of stuff, and
Yes.
people will be like,
Yeah.
There's that group.
Yes.
It may not be your group, but
Right.
That's going on.
Yes, excellent clarification. All right, so who is this being affected by? I want you to know that in the next Sunday, we had Buddhists, rabbis, like that. So in fact, the person who came up with the next Sunday was my friend Alon Babchak, who's a rabbi, and he goes, "Oh, you're talking about next Sunday, in your context." Like, he got it right away. He just knew, and he says, "That's for you, but for me, it's next Saturday, and for our Muslim friend, next Friday." See, everybody is dealing. So this is not just a Christian issue; it's a religious issue. Now, the second question is, what about the anomalies? Like, what about some of the groups that are growing right now? And there are some particular groups that are growing very well. Some would be around the idea of the Pentecostal movement has quite a bit of movement happening. It is attached to prosperity gospel as well, so there's something there for me. And it's happening normally in particular ethnic groups of some. So it catches fire in a particular place. And also this is an international issue, not just a U.S. issue. So it's happening, especially South America and others. Now, there are some people that I've talked to on the other side of that conversation that don't feel good about that. They have really strong feelings that I wish your American influence televangelist prosperity gospel thing did not come to my country, because people believe that the prosperity of the pastor is the symbol of religious blessing. And I watch all my friends give so much money so that he can drive around in a Mercedes and wear the ring and whatever. And so I'm not sure that it's a good thing that some of these are growing. The other one that is intensifying in our context, and again, I'm not trying to be political, I'm just trying to tell you the stats, is that white Christian nationalism is growing leaps and bounds, and they're not afraid to call it that. Like, that is the banner that they stand under. And there's a lot of energy and a lot of excitement to bring their religion, to bear here in the U.S. Again, I'm not trying to make it political. I'm just saying that not everybody is having a problem with the next Sunday. There are some people that their Sunday or Saturday or others, because it's beyond Christian nationalism. There's nationalism in every country. You look at what's happening right now in Iran. It's amazing, but that particular religious group literally today said we need to bring in the discipline, the religious discipline of punishment. Like, that's what our people need. So there are some religions, on the right, but I don't know at the level that it's a majority. These are smaller pockets that I would consider anomalies. But it is happening. And I also would say, on the other side that we've known forever, is that the largest growing religious group in North America is the spiritual but not religious. The nuns, N-O-N-E-S, right? That they are deeply spiritual, but don't want to be connected with any kind of organized religion, which is basically they're looking for the next Sunday, or have already created it, and we need to find out what they're doing. You know what I mean? And they're deeply committed, doing wonderful works too. So, does that answer it? Was that close?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. But those are good, because I don't want to make blanket statements, without clarification if there's a question or idea. And I don't know, on Zoom, can we see in the chat, or maybe not? But okay. Other thoughts, ideas?
I have a question. I'm thinking of why people might want to come to church the next Sunday. Did you find anything about sacraments? Is that important to people? Or having funerals, place for that?
Yeah. I don't know how it is here, but in California, anyone could get basically a one-day ordination, whatever, to marry their friends. And so nobody is really going to we've lost the lock, on saying you have to have a minister marry you or bury you. These are things that now in California, at least, I don't know how it is here, but anyone can do. So those rites and rituals have been passed on. Baptism is one of the only things that, if it's in an ordained system, that you literally have to be ordained to do for that to be recognized. But in the non-denominational world, anybody can baptize anyone, so that's not the law. The thing that we're finding is ritual is not enough to have people return on a consistent basis. So it's not the draw that people would come in, every single week. But the needs in times of tragedy, celebration, these have been central places where the church has been that space. but I'm not sure it holds that anymore, just like the peacocking or the mating ritual. I think people have found other spaces where those celebrations and the tragedies and mourning happen. So no, it hasn't. Now, depends on the religion, because some are tied, to mass, let's say, and you don't get to go to the big house. I mean, like there are ways in which people have held that control. Because if you can hold hell over somebody, then you kind of win, a little bit. But that has been deeply suspect in the last 10 years. So I got in a little bit of trouble writing a book called Heretic's Guide to Eternity, questioning whether it was all that big of a deal, like the heaven and hell thing. Like, I basically said I was a universalist who believes in hell, which is, I believe everybody gets in, but there's a few idiots out there that I like to see in hell. So I'm gonna hold that open for them, and you can name your list right now. I kind of hope they're in hell, but that's bad. But that's the only reason I kind of believe in a little hell, little hell, but yeah. So I am not sure today the heaven and hell question is even anything that's really discussed much. There's a huge movement of people talking about bringing heaven here on earth as it is in heaven. So there's a lot more conversation about, I gotta tell you this, a lot more conversation about the here and now, even if there's no tomorrow or no eternity. Doesn't matter to me. That's theoretical anyways. We're all gonna figure it out when it happens, whatever. But even to the point where a friend of mine, here's your heretical quote. We were just having a talk and whatever, and a conversation at a consult just a little while ago, last week. And he's going to do a t-shirt. I think it'd be hilarious. But we were talking about the idea of why are we so fixated on the death of Jesus? We miss the life of Jesus. And even the complication of understanding, as scary as it might be, an abusive dad that could do something to his own child. We've done some theological gymnastics where if you go back 1,000 years, none of this is, it's a different conversation, in that. So he actually said that he thinks that Jesus came to show us life, which I believe, in the idea of being fully human, and that it was Jesus being such complete love that was God's plan, and that in our own resentment, pride, arrogance, we killed Jesus. We killed Jesus. That wasn't God's plan, but we killed Jesus for political, religious, power issues, right? And so what he wants to do is do a t-shirt that says, damn, I gotta fix this too, God. What? There were no plans for resurrection. Jesus was supposed to be here, show us how to live or whatever, and all of a sudden we killed Jesus, and God's like, what? Okay, I'll raise them from the dead then. It's just was that the whole deal even? Was it, or was it to show us? In fact, last time I was here, I talked about, I think we're so concerned in being godly, we've forgotten what it means to be human. That was Jesus' real mission, was to show us how to be fully human here on earth, towards each other, with ourselves, everything else. So I don't even know why I got on that rabbit trail. But what?
So are you finding more and more people? I mean, when you describe everything that these people are after, it was community that brought everybody together. And so are you finding that these people have substituted that community somewhere on a deeper level, or are they still looking for that community? And in a way, it's like connecting on a way that is deeper than just listening to somebody on Zoom, but it's actually having conversations and being there for people and support, at times when they need it, when they celebrate. Those kinds of things, it seems like, is what the church, what people want out of the church, more so even than maybe the spiritual teaching, or it's that personal, connection with people. Does that come up in some of your
Yes.
stuff?
Yeah. So let me say that it's not that people are anti-teaching, they get it somewhere else in a better form. So nobody is saying, I want to compromise. Nobody's saying, oh, you know what, give it to me even worse than I had. Nobody's doing that, They're basically saying, I found a better way. You know what I mean? And Richard Rohr, Father Rohr, says that the answer to the good is the better. I mean, we don't need to, fight anybody who's having a great, wonderful thing. But if we show, and it's even better. So even like the people who are listening, and hearing and seeing us online, and it's better for them. See? So I don't think people will compromise on community as the next thing. I think they're going to find even a better way that, quite honestly, the last 50 years, we have been on the decline. Does that make sense? Church, in its form that we had pre-pandemic, was already dying. No one is arguing that it was on a growth curve. It was on Pew was telling us that literally by 2050, with the curve that was headed, there would be no church anyways, So this just accelerated it, you know what I mean? So it's not something that people wanted to go to. It's really something that people are saying, what else is there? What's next? I think you've hit on it, and it's the issue of community. I want to jump into that, but I also want to make sure that there isn't any other question, because once we jump there, it's light speed, it's fun, it's crazy, all right? So, but where we are now, how we got here, the issues, like any other questions about, or even comments or things you've seen? Yeah.
You're speaking about community. I'm long considered an outlier in this church.
Mm-hmm.
But just from my own experience, I parked out in the parking lot here before I ever walked in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was this is, years ago.
Yeah.
And I was so thrilled because I said to myself, these people know the cross. These people center their discussion just effortlessly. It isn't like a big, like leverage or whatever. These people center their discussion about the cross. And that was a community that mattered to me because we can see each other. You take each other home, in your recollection. You work issues through in a way that to me matters. And so it's a little different sense of community than just playing bingo.
Right. Excellent point. Love that. Well, and let me also say, one of the reasons why I love returning here is because you guys are onto something. You know what I mean? Like from way back, the processes, the conversations, the organization of the way in which you do this, and the questions you're asking about what's next really energized me. So, but community, I love the way that you've said that community is, there are different ways of thinking about community. Yes. Any other?
I have a question.
Yes, yeah.
At your next Sunday conference or in some of the other stuff that you're doing, have you considered or discussed the downsides, not to losing like church or whatever, but to how do I say it? When you lose contact with people in a real way, in a proximity, it's a very easy slope to extremism of any kind.
Yeah.
And not just for people who are prone to it. And I bet I would venture to say that all of us know at least a few people who have been down some rabbit hole who you can't even have a conversation with anymore. And those people are very rarely people who are in a community where you're bumping into each other and have a real life together. So you actually have real discussions. They're in a community that's a one-way track with a certain message or idea that just it keeps going down that route. And so while there's plenty of good, have you guys had any discussions about that sort of thing? Like when you talk about white nationalism growing, or, well, yeah, because they're just hanging out with each other. And so I'm just curious if you know.
Yeah, so yes, and I don't want this to sound judgmental, so take it for what it's worth, push back against whatever else. I think there's a difference between community, and this is a harsh word, and a cult, okay? We've had cults forever. You know, there's a definition for it, there are identifiers for it, you know, way before where we're at right now. So I'm not trying to say who's a cult or who's not a cult. But the way you describe the idea of somebody going down a rabbit hole, you know, only thinking in one way, having a powerful leader perhaps, having rites and rituals and symbols, secret, you know, like all of these things are things that you can find straight down the list of a cult way back to Egypt time, thousands of thousands, you know, like, so we're not trying to argue that is community. For me, I'm not arguing that every group of people that are gathered together is healthy in that way. So I wouldn't call that community. I'd call that a cult. And I think we all have to be very careful to make sure that we're always checking ourselves too. You know what I mean? Like, are you in a cult? You know what I mean? Like, you got to be asking yourself, do you fall into that? So let's be careful. Let's be honest and real and ask, am I in true community, or have I fallen to a way of thinking that is not helpful? And the them and us thinking, the I'm absolutely right, all of that, the otherness of people, you know, like there is that kind of thing that always creates the potential, at least, for that. So yes, I would say healthy community is what we're trying to talk about in that way. The other thing I would say is the conversation. I may have used this illustration before, but it would have been years ago. So when you think about the church and Sunday morning going away, I don't think if Sunday morning goes away, church goes away. All right. Do you remember when, you know, there were cassette tapes? Anybody remember? Or 8-track tapes, you know, and then there were CDs, right? You know, and that was kind of trying to wipe out LPs, you know, remember the vinyl, right? Well, every time we went through one of those transitions, the music industry said, you are killing music. Music will die. Remember? They said that, you know, and so Napster shows up, remember? And Napster basically had figured out a way where individuals who did not want to buy 16 songs for $16 on plastic, they wanted one song, and that's all, and Napster gave them an opportunity to be able to do that. Well, what was the reaction of the music industry, especially the drummer from Metallica, right? He basically said, you're stealing, you're pirating, you're stealing our music. And he sued his fans, called them pirates, stealing, right? How helpful can that be, all right? So today, if the church sees people moving away from Sunday morning, and we look at those parishioners and say, you're consumeristic, you're selfish, you know, why don't you be a team player? You see, you know, you're leaving the church, you know, you're killing the church, right? Or well before Apple and everything else. There was mp3.com. There were a number of others that wanted to charge, 99 cents or a monthly fee or whatever else to be able to release this music. It was the most brilliant, we have found now, way in which you could release music. See? People can download for 99 cents or now in a subscription. And what did that do? Did it kill music? It transformed the music industry. But what happened is back catalogs were now available. You could never get the Byrds album, that was out of print until we unleashed it electronically. You'd never have a garage band be able to be discovered until we released it. You'd never be able to have particular ethnic music that could never draw that large of a contract or population to be able to release, and whole new genres of music came out. Do you see? So it didn't kill music. It transformed the music industry. So the next Sunday will not kill the church. It will transform church. It might kill the industrial religious complex, as who was it, Eisenhower would say, with military. See, there's an industry that needs to be protected. And who are the gatekeepers? Seminaries, publishers, denominational adjudicants. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes, they are probably all out of a job. They are scrambling faster than even the church right now. And the church is looking to them to say, what's next? And they don't even know what's next for them. That's when you get this tectonic, plates shifting. So there is a conversation about it. I don't think it's about, is church going to die? I think it's asking more about what will healthy community look like in the next iteration. And here's the other part. I hear people talking about what will churches look like? What will theologies look like? What will communities look like? We're not looking for one single way of doing church anymore. It'll be, and I don't think Sunday morning will die. I think that'd be rude. There are a lot of people that find a beautiful sense of, tradition and ritual, and I hope that always exists, So it won't kill it. But Sunday will be one of many things. Which begs the question, we'll jump into this in a minute, which begs the question of today, what percentage of budgets are utilized to fund, staff, house, and support the Sunday morning experience versus the other types of church that will emerge. And that's when the industry will start to reimagine itself. Does that make sense? Other questions, comments on this part before we jump into the next? Clarifying.
Jump into the next.
Okay, here you go. Ready? So the next Sunday, I do a thing called lean faith, right? The whole idea about lean faith is you start with a hypothesis. And then you got to go out and listen, observe, hear, and see what's going on. Then you work towards the idea of prototyping around it, then partnering and sustainability, whatever. But here is my hypothesis. All right? And this is just me. But my belief is that one of the forms, and this is my hypothesis, I think the fastest way to re-engage your congregation, your community, the easiest and most cost-effective way to bring hope, love, care into your community, meaning being that hands and feet of God, and then also the most nimble to be able to pivot, persevere, and iterate is, drum roll please, common cause communities. I believe this is going to be one of the main ways in which people will find ways to be church. Now if I told you the case studies of this, these would be the things that I was discovering last time I was here, right? These are the things where you would see in Brazil. They were creating, from Greece into gospel. I don't know if you remember that story. Or there'd be the Laundry Love, where they were going into laundromats. And it would have been the Street Angels who were coming and with homeless teens and doing veterinarian services. Do you see? There were all these different stories that I was discovering as I was going out and seeing these as case studies of what actually was happening well before the pandemic, the early, stages of what we needed. And I think I said this back then. Brian McLaren wrote a book called The Great Migration. And it was how people had left the Sunday morning experience and created new forms of Sunday morning. And it was a migration. It wasn't a wholesale, I hate it, or they were doing church. They just weren't allowed to call it church yet. You know what I mean? And now people are recognizing that this is probably one of the many new forms of next Sunday, the way in which you can be church. So let me just give you what I mean by common cause community, and then you play with it if you want. So common is this idea that we hold something in common. I believe it's faith, all right? Now, I take the biblical definition of faith, though, out of Hebrews, right? It's the hope of things not seen, the belief of things that could be, right? It's not tangible. Faith isn't something you can point to, it's this belief that the world can be this place God has desired it to be. And it's your faith. You haven't lost faith in that. You have faith that can happen, right? Then I tack on the back end of that, James, where in a lot of the evangelical world, because they want to be grace-driven, felt very awkward with James. And he said that faith, which is this hope, faith without works is dead. But the reality is, if your hope doesn't have some action, it hasn't come to life. Your faith needs action to become alive. So faith without action is dead. Do you see what I'm saying? So faith, and when I'm talking about common cause communities, to the idea, it's not just about Christianity. It is any group of faith people. And I think people who don't even believe in God can still be faith-filled people or faithful people. Do you understand what I'm saying? They have this sense of connection to one another around an idea of what is the dream, the hope, the belief of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. If God is love, you know what I mean? And they'll know we are his disciples by our love. It's the faith in what could be, you know what I mean? And I define that as humane spirituality, which is restoring human dignity to both the oppressed and the oppressor. Is kind of my definition of it. So there's a common faith, all right? Think of any group, that could be doing this, right? Then a cause, right? It's something that they all have the idea that they want to rally around, right? So it's what's an issue that you have? See, and I don't think common cause communities are for life. I think they're probably pop-up, and you'll pop from one to another, to another, to another when it meets your needs. And the cause might continue, but you might move on to another cause or start another cause. So I don't think that you have to be connected to this for life. But what's a cause that you could rally around? There's a lot of issues, it could be literacy, it could be childcare. It could be the issue of migration or climate change. It could be about protecting a wilderness area. It could be like I don't know what it is, but there are enough causes out there that we can all rally around. but it's the people that have this common faith, it's an approach to it, right, that see this cause. Now, at that moment, it could just be social justice, all right? It could be also the idea of a social entrepreneur, right? There are a ton of people who have something in common and they fight for those rights. The thing that makes it spiritual for me is the third component, and that's community, right? Here's the reason why for me, is that have you ever run into somebody who is, let's just say it out loud, an anti-Trumper, right? Have you ever run into somebody who's an anti-Trumper and is more Trump than Trump? Never run into them? They are cussing his name out. They're going after him. They want to see him in jail. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're the exact same thing, just a different hat. You know what I'm saying? So you got to figure out that if hatred, fear, and shame are your motivators, then you might have a common hatred, and you might have this cause to put him in jail or make him pay or whatever it is, but you have not really done the community work. You see what I'm saying? Because in community, and this is what I love about what you were saying, is that in community, you have to face yourself. And it's the community that helps you see that, you see? Because when you're doing this work, if you're using tactics of fear, shame, hurt, control, that is not a common cause community. Ultimately, if it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, see all of these things, then it makes it a spiritual place. Because ultimately, a common cause community not only helps create a new world, but it also helps us understand what part do we play in that oppression? What part do we play in keeping this going? And here's the illustration. Have you ever run into somebody who is this person who gives great money to causes that they believe in, right? But then, so let's say it's youth health, and it's the environment, and save the Amazon for whatever it is. But then you ask, where is this money coming from? You go, I don't know. I've got this stock guy who does whatever. So, but you realize that they invest in Philip Morris, but they want to see youth health. That they're working with the paper mines, mills, but they want to save the Amazon. So they take 10% of their 100% that they invested. So they take and spend 100% to create the issue, and they take 10% to try to solve it. That does not work. You know what I mean? We're going to become closer to the destruction than if we took it in a holistic view. So the community helps us understand our part in the oppression as we're trying to solve the oppression. Does that make some sense? So it's a common cause and community. And I think that this will be one of the new forms of church. They won't meet on Sunday. They won't be led by ministers, but there'll be people who see themselves as that role of being able to care for people who lead these, but they'll also do it in a team, because I think you create a design team to start to talk about what is the cause that we want to rally around, and how do we create a plan that we don't create more harm than good. There's ways to walk through that. And so that's where I think one of the most effective and efficient ways that we can move out quickly and engage our congregations, our communities, and do good in the world, while also seeing the spiritual component that's not met in a podcast, not met on dating, but in a deep spiritual way, which could be described as the new discipleship, or the idea of equipping the saints to do good in the world. You see, I'll just throw that crazy thought open then. Any thoughts, ideas, or pushback? Or you say, I think I got a common cause. You know, like, we could play with one of them if you want. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
So I know we had talked about this earlier, but it sounds like to me theoretically and practically that a common cause community could be something that they potentially, you know, whoever's involved in that may not be considered, they may not consider themselves Christian, spiritual, or whatever, but if they're doing love, patience, kindness, all, you know, they're doing those things, I mean, it's really, I mean, that could be the definition of it as well. Right?
Yes. We'll blur the lines now, where we had departments of discipleship, departments of mission, departments of evangelism, right? We saw them as something different than each other. I don't know how you do evangelism without discipleship. I don't know how you have discipleship without evangelism. So for someone to join the common cause in community, what's the criteria? Well, can you hold to the commonness of our faithful belief of a better world in this way and form? Can you connect with this cause? Then you're in. And I think one new form of evangelism is going to be enlisting people in things that they want to do, be involved with, get involved with. You know what I mean? Who in the world, you know, that doesn't want to serve the poor isn't following Jesus? You know what I mean? Like, and as people come, isn't that evangelism? You know, Apple actually has the title of lifestyle evangelist in their titles, that they want people to become an evangelist of Apple products as a new lifestyle, you know? So evangelism is this whole idea that if someone wants to serve the poor with you, you invite them. No criteria, no. And is that not a place where they will also be discipled? If we really don't have a problem getting people to church, unless we're trying to get them to Sunday morning. We can get people to church or churches if we redefine what it means. It's just like Napster, or, you know, more music is sold today than in the history of the world, right? When Netflix came out, we said if people didn't have to go to the movie theater, you know, it's going to kill it. It didn't. It created new forms where Academy Awards could come from Netflix and from the studios. We got better movies, you know, some streamed, some were in theaters. Now AMC has, I don't know, whatever your theaters are out here, but probably they have a subscription now where you can pay so much per month and go see 3 movies a week or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, movies are thriving now, even through the pandemic. It seems to be stronger. You can go on, you know, with whether it's the music industry or whether it's with the movie industry or whatever, that these new ways of doing it. I think what'll happen is people want what church is. We just don't have forms of that yet. We're seeing early forms of it. You got to remember, in the 50s, this is crazy. For church, some of the ways that we made church work, here, I don't know, maybe I'm going a little off subject, but take it for what it's worth, because I think we're going to find how this is going to happen to the new forms of church, right? I don't know if you know this or not, but when you go down the old town square, right, in probably your old hometown, what happens when you get downtown? There many times is literally a street named Church Street. Did you know that? And what's on that street? Churches. Do you want to know why? It's because in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the Chamber of Commerce and the City Council believed the greatest way to grow their town was to give free property to particular denominations and synagogues, the property. And if they built a church there, the town would grow. And they knew there was no tax base for giving away this free land to the church because it would create a new church. And church planters, Pastors knew all they had to do was get into a town that didn't have a Nazarene church, a Lutheran church, a Disciples church, a Presbyterian church, whatever your brand is. And if it wasn't there, they could put up their shingle and get free land if they were approved, and people would show up to that church. Do you see how the system wanted it to work because there was benefit to everyone at that time in the way in which they thought of it? There were huge issues with that, and I can get into that if you want. But, where churches could be positioned, what ethnic groups could be on what side of the track, why was there the first Presbyterian and then the second Presbyterian, and what did that mean? There were a whole bunch of reasons why it was weird. But at the time, it worked. And we're going to do weirdness when we do churches next. And our kids are going to look at us and go, oh, you did that? That was so, whatever, right? And I don't even know the mistakes we'll make, but we'll make them, right? But think about how the infrastructure helped. So when we create these new churches, realize that evangelism, discipleship, care, mission will all be happening, and it will benefit. And there'll be weird partnerships where all of a sudden, Croy is sponsoring, churches that are helping with, black farmers. I don't know who's going to sponsor these churches. It might not even be the idea of tithes and offering. In fact, here's what I really believe. I'm getting crazy, but here's what I actually believe. I actually believe the way in which church and churches in the forms that we understand them today are going to kill themselves is because of their political involvement. All right? Here's what's going to happen is at some point, and it's not too far away, the government will turn around and say there's no longer tax exemption for political arms of churches. And you no longer get free taxes, tax-based, free, you don't have to pay property tax in California, at least, see? And that will kill them. Because they have no sustainable model apart from the grants and foundations and tithes and offerings. There really isn't anything else. You know what will happen? The sustainability of common cause communities, and I don't think of sustainability as money. That's not it. It's solving the riddle of sustainability. Because I think these new common cause communities, these churches, they will find ways to sustain themselves in new and different ways, and they won't need to be nonprofits or for-profits. They probably will be businesses even, where the owner of the business sees themselves as the pastor of the people who they're inviting to come and be a part of this vision. Is that kind of weird? You know what I mean? So what are the ways in which we should be training new pastors? I don't know that I wrote an article years ago that I think, are we training pastors for jobs that no longer exist? You know what I'm saying? Like, do we need preachers? I'm not sure, I don't know. And think of all the other things that we think of as in churches that way versus what the new, a different way. I want to turn one more corner. Any other questions, thoughts on this part? Yeah? Okay, so now let's get weird, all right? Again, no one's asked me to say this, so I might be really getting in trouble. But think about 10 years from now, all right? Here, maybe I get invited back. I don't know if I do after I do this, but I come back 10 years from now and we're in conversation again, right? What are the churches that we have here? See what I'm saying? Now let me play with this. the return on investment, ROI, everybody's heard this, right? It's a business term. It's like, okay, how am I doing this? And what's my return on what I put into it, right? You guys are positioned in an amazing way. I think the return on investment in the way in which you are doing this now works. I don't know longevity of that. I think we're in transition. So the question is, 10 years from now, if you're doing it exactly the same as you're doing now, will it be sustainable? I don't know. I just don't know, right? Then there's another thing called the cost of inaction. So it's COI, right? The cost of inaction. So 10 years from now, if you don't find new ways of being churches, what's the cost? You see what I'm saying? Are you here? You know, is it working? Are you reaching people? Are people excited about it? Has Breckenridge been influenced by you and your presence, even if they don't put a brand on it? You know what I'm saying? So I think ROI is going to crush, you know what I mean? You're not going to be able to sustain it with the new ways in which I think nonprofits are going. But I also think the cost of inaction I don't think you'll have energy and excitement. I don't think you'll have the, community that you'd hoped for. You say, now, if you create new churches 10 years from now, I think the return on investment is going to be amazing, because you won't even be thinking about this building as a Sunday morning thing. This will be just buzzing with, I don't know what, but it'll be happening 24/7, There's going to be something kind of happening going. And ultimately, I think Breckenridge here and beyond will be thinking like, wow, look at what has happened. Look at how we've, exported love and care around the world. Not just sponsored missionaries, but been actually involved in doing work and supporting that. And so my challenge is, think about first of all, I think you've got the faith component. Even if your theologies are all over the map, it doesn't matter. That is not the thing that will keep you together. It's the faith in believing in something you cannot see yet, and the hope for that to happen, and putting feet to it. So I think you've got that, you know what I mean? And then the question is, what are the causes that might be things that you would want to explore, that you can create community around? You may start it as your own design team, but with the lab I'm doing at the Methodist Church in Fullerton, we did it with a cause, and we've created a design team. Then we've launched the idea. Now, a year later, more people are involved in the causes that we're doing that are outside the church than are inside the church. And the question is, are they at least affiliated with our church? Are they new members of our church? And we say, we take spiritual responsibility for their lives when they're with us. Do you see? And the crazy thing is, they also go to another church, and they also go to yoga, and they also do the clinic down the street. And do you see? I don't know that they think of church as one location anymore. There are so many different places where they are finding the ways in which they can be. So do you have to be a part of only one Common Cause community or one church or one? No, you can be part of a bunch of them. So I just threw out some crazy crap there. That was a little bit scary maybe, but I would invite you to think about ways of, now, and here's the other thing that's crazy. What if at least some, let's just say some, I want to say most, but let's say some. What if some of your pastors are outside this building and have never been here yet, and don't look traditional because they didn't go to seminary, and seminary isn't needed anymore. Seminarians are scared. What if they're entrepreneurial in your community and deeply faithful people, and they've been waiting for you to come alongside them and help them be God in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I'm just, and what if that can be as important as a Sunday morning gathering? And you're thinking about that in the ways in which you resource your Sunday morning as you would with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 other communities, churches. So now I might be in trouble and have to get to the airport tonight instead of tomorrow morning. But is that just too weird? You know what I mean? Are there passions that you think about and you go, oh, we really should do something about that? You can. You know what I mean? So I got a whole nother little thing, but I don't want to step on this moment though too. So how crazy is that? And as you think about people who you bump into, your friends that are not in this room, are they some of the people who are those that it might not be you that need to do this? You know, there may be people that are here in the community or even down the hill or even in another state. You know what I mean? Like we could think about missions even differently, you know?
Can you speak to when I think of our BCS community, I think I see quite a bit of something like that. I know in discussions like we'll have like John and I'll have or something, you know, it'll be like, well, I just haven't, this person, you know, are they still a part of this thing that we're doing or whatever? But then it's like, well, then, you know, I know that in their business, this is how they're viewed. This is what they pursue. This is how, you know, they are with their employees, whatever. And I tend to see like kind of what you're describing going on quite a bit with us, but there's a struggle in it too. And maybe it's not a struggle that's necessarily needed, but I've felt like that I felt like you want to have a central hub, not a place of authority, not a place of experts, but a place of reminder of what we're doing as we're doing it, and a place to come back to. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes and no. There's hybrid, you know what I mean? So there are ways in which you say, hey, we're going to gather all the Common Cause communities together, more likely monthly, not weekly or quarterly, and share the stories and think and support and what, you know, like, so in that way you do that. But here's what I want to challenge you with a little bit. I don't think that this is a tweak. Moving from the outer courtyard at the temple at 70 AD took the destruction of the temple, you know, and the Roman Empire to come after the Christians. You know what I'm saying? Like that, it took Constantine to actually flip the whole chart upside down and say the people of honor are Christians and we've been killing them all along. Like I said, radical shifts in systems thinking, right? So take this for a moment. If you think about why Napster worked, right? It was early blockchain, all right? And this is how it worked, is that you had to have your computer on and it was able to use part of your processing, your computer processor when you weren't working, to be able to trade songs. You hosted songs, even if you didn't know it, you were hosting some songs as you were trading songs. So I think the power structure is going to be radically different. I don't think it will be hierarchical. I think it will be more along the understanding of blockchain. And I know blockchain is the best buzzword word. Blockchain's been around forever in some forms. You know what I mean? Now, secured blockchains are different and that kind of thing. But that idea of ownership, that idea of disruption as well as distribution are some of the things. So be thinking a little bit more like, so I don't think you could be thinking that these are your common cause communities anymore. See what I'm saying? I'm thinking you've got to be thinking more along the lines of not ownership, but participation. You are participating, you are supporting, you are caring for, you are encouraging, think about it more in a democratized way, that, all of a sudden some, common cause communities go one way or another. Well, just like their pop-up, you can kind of pop up a little bit of, this one went a certain way, we're really not supporting that as much anymore, but this new one came up, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to lock in, it's not forever and ever anymore, you know what I mean? It's a different kind of thing. So I would just say the urges for control have to be self-checked. And this is a really good point, I think, that you're kind of bringing up, though, is what are the new metrics? How do you know you've succeeded? Do you see? Like, you've got to be asking, So it might not be, there's software now, I forget the names of them, but there's a ton of them. And churches buy it, and they help you keep attendance. It helps you keep how many dollars have come in. It helps you keep, what assets you own, from chairs to whatever, and you do the inventory on it, right? These are all the metrics that we're following. I probably said this before, but I playfully say that when I was at Mariners, right? Well, when you knew you were successful based on bucks in the seats, right? Bucks in the plate, and then buildings on your property, right? And if you got all three of those right, you got the bonus B, which is you could write a book about it. And so those were the metrics. And now those metrics are those kinds of things. And I think what the new emerging metrics are going to be fascinating to understand. So Napster didn't work because it really was piracy. But you know what? Now I'm on to something else. No, but do a study on pirates. It's brilliant. Pirates are cool, and not Johnny Depp cool. I'm talking about pirates really created disruption in the governmental system of colonialism and capturing, and it's a really interesting, totally illegal, totally wrong, totally wrong, totally wrong. Great though, really great, right? So piracy, in a sense, for music disrupted it. It was stealing. It was stealing. So it got us to a place where we could find an Apple Music and an Spotify, and do you see what I'm saying? It got us out to a place. So some of the things that we'll measure won't make sense and might even be disturbing at first, but we'll find our way to figure that out. So the impulse of control, I would probably, keep in check.
I was more thinking of connection rather than control.
And I guess on that, I would just say decentralization.
Yeah.
That here's what I would say. I say two ways. Anytime that it's meaningful, do it. You know what I mean? And anytime they ask for it, facilitate it. You see what I'm saying? But right off the bat, I'm thinking, oh yeah, how do we have them once a month in here? And how do we do that? They haven't asked for that yet. They need to just build their common cause community before they make a commitment to something else. You know what I mean? But if you love and care and support them, and then they say, you know what I need, try to find a way to support them with that. And if it's meetings, then you could do meetings. But I think accountability is going to be in that small part of the blockchain, in a sense. But I would never say that they don't exist without all of the systems somehow connecting, but when they need it. Because I do think that the way in which we will make radical systems change is when a whole bunch of common cause communities that work on the issue of environment find out that doing their own work is very powerful, but if they start to work together without compromising their faith idea, you know what I mean? Because again, we're not talking about trying to, compromise. We're trying to find a new way of doing things. But what if 50 groups that are working on the environment faithfully find a way in which they can gather together and become one large common cause community, and do something bigger than what they could do alone, and then die as soon as they do that. Like they're not trying to keep it going, maybe. So accountability and all of that, I think, is going to look a little different. Known and unknown, and subconsciously and consciously, and but I don't know. Like that's my guess. But those are the hints. So when we're kind of asking, what have I seen? What am I seeing out there? What are the early hints of this? This is my guess. This is my hypothesis. This is what I think. If we look back a few years from now, we will see some traction and energy. Not as the only one, but one of hundreds, thousands, millions of ways in which we can be church. Because I think there's so much more that goes into it than just simply the. So, real quick, can I give you 3 things that I think create common cause communities, all right? The first is, I think, a leader. I really do. I actually, in this day and age, I still believe that there is a leader, someone who has a vision, a hope, and a dream, right? So a leader has this faith, this belief, right? And I think what they do is they have to do something, like I studied the Enneagram, and that's how I met Father Rohr, right? I really believe in it, not as a parlor trick, but as deep work on figuring out how we disintegrate. How is it that people could call it sin or anything you want to call it. It's just the way we self-sabotage. It's just, honestly, it's how we become inhuman in a world that we should be humane, right? And you can see the inhumanity all around us. And it's people who lose sight of how they personally disintegrate. And I think we've got to restore that human dignity to ourselves, like love as we love ourselves, right? So first, I think we have to look at the way we disintegrate and the way we integrate. And in that way, you become a strong spiritual person yourself, right? Then with that, I think you start to define that cause and what success is. Because we need to know what success is, right? So, and I think there's a whole process of defining that so you know what it is. And I think it's much smaller, much incremental. I believe in a minimum viable benefit. I believe in the idea of minimizing risk, taking small, experiments or prototypes. I don't think you jump to the main thing, but I think that is, and in that, I think you start to find a design team. You find 4 or 5 people, 3 to 5 people who would be on your team, would say, hey, I believe in that. They have different gifts. And then as a leader, you help them understand how to integrate and know and recognize their disintegration. It's discipleship, you know what I'm saying? And here's a priest, here's a minister, here's a spiritual leader, right? And then as they start to work together on the a process of creating an experiment of a common cause community, they start to see this starts to work. And as you do that, you start to create community where you're inviting a larger group of people to participate. And I think at that moment, you don't do them and us. See what I'm saying? The people you serve and the people who serve are in it together. And here's just a quick little way in which I think that happens, is there's you, like who you are, right? There's this circle. And then there's them, the people who you love and care for and want to serve, right? Typically, you try to figure out, how are we going to do this together? You'd merge those 2 circles together and you'd find the Venn diagram, right? You'd find that one piece. But that's compromise. That's like the lowest common denominator. That's not helpful. But if you are strong and they are strong, I think together you create a new we. That makes sense. Something that has never existed before. That's where the magic happens. That's where the surprise happens, right? And it's because they are who they are and you are who you are, and you don't merge it. You actually create something wholly and totally new and different. And that's when you start to find this community that becomes so much more different than you ever dreamed or thought. And that's where the spiritual work happens. So that's what I would say is that, you kind of do this leadership, you find a core team, design team, and then you move towards your cause. And for me, I use the Enneagram and then I use the Lean Faith Canvas to be able to do the two sections afterwards, which is the design work, the one-page design package, and then the work for that. So I don't think it's impossible to do. I'm not trying to tell you, oh, it's this, now go. It's like I really believe, and I've seen a process work within the lab that I'm doing there at the Methodist Church. And it's brought more excitement, more energy. It's brought in, I mean, the silliest, craziest thing is, it's brought in money. It's brought in people from outside that would never, they want to grow the church. I don't want to grow the church. I mean, I have no interest in growing Sunday morning, but the church is growing, you know what I mean? And it's finding its way. So, I don't know. Too crazy? 2 minutes. What do you think? I hope this wasn't too much of a fire hose, but I want to give you hope and a belief that there is something ahead. And I think you guys are poised for this kind of work. I think the way in which your history and your polity, the way you organize, and the resources that you have are there, in that way. I think there is just a beautiful, bright, wonderful way. And Common Cause Community is only one of many, many ways. I hope that you are thinking about whatever next Sunday is, along with what you do as Sunday Now. Fair enough? Makes sense? Anybody got a last comment or?
You packed a lot in.
I have just a lot to think about. It was great. It's just like.
Oh, we didn't record.
It was
Oh, we
a
did
great
record
hour.
it. Good. You've got a copy then if you want to
Yes.
go through that. And, yeah, there's
It's great.
there's a lot in there, and who knows? But I love you guys, and I think you guys are. Can I take the last minute and give you a little blessing? Is that all right? All right. Let me just give this to you. Eyes wide open for this benediction of blessing. And I want you to look around. Just look around, not me. Look at you guys. Look at each other. Most of you know each other and have deep relationship and everything else. I mean, like, this is it. You are the hands and feet of God. You know what I mean? This is not a moment in time where there's fear, worry, and concern. There may be lament, because what has been is passing. And whatever stage of grief, from Captain Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of death and dying, what it is dying. All right? And give yourself room for the denial, the bartering and bargaining, and the pain and anger, to come out at the other side of saying, okay, what is it? And in that way, may you find new and fresh ways. I think the road ahead of you is beautiful, filled with wonderful, amazing opportunities. The questions you'll have will not be how much or who will do it. Trust me. It'll be, how can we love the people who are already doing this? How can we come along the places where God is already at work? How can we unleash the things that we have to support the places where God is already, and the people who are already called who don't even know it yet as the new next ministers in the new next ways in which we are church. Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Crazy. Oh, okay, yeah. Thanks. Now we gotta get a beer. That's